Hi guys, welcome back. In this video we're making a simple knotted Christmas tree decoration. We've made our knotted net to hold one of these polystyrene cone shaped Christmas trees. We've put some beautiful beads on as well and hung it by a wooden ring. This is a really simple way of displaying one of these polystyrene Christmas trees. We've got these beautiful metal star beads which we're going to space out throughout our design. We've also got our little polystyrene cone, which is about 10 centimetres tall. We're using a small wooden macrame ring, and the cord we're using is a 0.8mm cord, which we need 4 120 centimetre lengths. Now we start by placing the ends together, following it back down to the other ends and placing those together as well. Now holding all those ends, we make our way back down to the middle. Now holding this point in the middle here, we're going to place it through our macrame ring, holding that point, and now we're going to tie a simple overhand knot. So bringing all those cords around to form a loop, bringing the ends through the loop and pulling that down nice and tight. Working that knot up so it sits quite close to the ring, and then pulling each cord tight so that it sits nice and tidy. Now we can start tying our little knotted net. So we have 8 strands in total, so I'm just pulling 4 strands across to each side and then pulling that into groups of 2. So sort of just figuring out which 2 cords sit next to each other naturally and pulling those out so that we've got 4 groups of 2. Now on each group of 2 cords we're going to tie a simple overhand knot. So bring those cords around to form a loop, bringing the end through the loop and pulling that knot down about 1 to 1.5 centimetres away from that central knot. Now we do the same on all 4 groups. So just working our way around, bringing the cords around to form a loop, bringing the ends through the loop, pulling that down tight nice and even with the first knot. So about the same distance away from that central knot. Now working our way around onto the 3rd set of cords, tying another overhand knot and pulling it down nice and even with those first 2 knots. We want to make sure all the knots are nice and evenly spaced out on each layer as we move down our design. Just pulling this 3rd knot down, always pulling tension out from that centre knot so that all our knots sit nice and even. So this is our 4 knots for that first layer. Now moving forwards to form a net, we use that same technique but we pull in 1 cord from each side. So I find it helps if you can start to picture how your net is going to sit. So if you hold that cone up inside where the knots sit, you can start to see how your knots need to come down the side and how we pull them together. Now if you are placing beads on, now is the time to start if you want them up high on your net. So I'm just going to place 1 on this first layer. Doesn't matter what thread you pull them onto, just pull them up as far as they can go. Now our next cords we tie, we just pull 1 cord across from the right and 1 cord across from the left. So 2 cords that sit next to each other anyway, and then bring them around to form a loop. Bring the ends through the loop and pulling that knot down tight, about the same distance apart as the first knots. You can place as many beads as you like onto your cords, and then just work your way around, pulling 1 cord in from each side, so those cords that sit next to each other anyway, and then tie a simple overhand knot, pulling those knots down nice and even. You can always untie and retie any of these knots if you need to as you go. until they sit in the right positions. Any beads should be secured now up above those knots. So just work your way around, and then you should have 4 knots on each layer. So it's a little bit hard to see, but if you pull it out, it sort of looks like a square. And this is your net that's forming, so you can keep trying it in between on top of your little cone shape. So you can start to see how it looks on the cone, and also as you come down, your knots will need to be a little bit further apart. But for now, we're going to just work our way down, tying our knots. So if you want to place any more beads on each layer, you just do that in between tying the knots. Then just bring one cord across from each side, tying a simple overhand knot, and tying your 4 knots onto each layer. Now as you come down the cone, each layer of knots will need to be slightly further apart, just to allow for the size of the cone getting a little bit bigger. So at the top they were, say, like 1.5 centimeters apart. Towards the bottom they might be 2 and then 3 centimeters apart. But just check your netting on your cone in between each layer of knots and see how you're going. And make sure that all 4 knots on each layer are sitting nice and evenly. Then you can place as many beads on as you like, and keep tying those 4 knots as you work your way down the cone shape. So you can see my little gaps in between each knot got slightly bigger, and I've come all the way down to the base of my cone now. So all I'm going to do is bring all these cords underneath to the middle, and I find if I just sort of twist my cone and twist those cords together, then that brings all the cords towards the center, and I can tie a simple overhand knot to secure this net in place. So just twisting them and then bringing the cords around to form a loop, bringing the ends through the loop and pulling this knot down tight into the middle there. That holds our little Christmas tree secure in the center. Now cutting those tails off, and there's your beautiful Christmas tree decoration.